The host of Wall Street Week, David Westin, joining us as he does every day at this time. David, always great conversations coming out of you here. And you actually had a chance to sit down with Finucane, a name I haven't heard in a while. Yeah. She was a big deal over at Bank of America, and now she's moving on to something else.
We've known her over the years at Bank of America, where she was vice chair, and now she's gone to TPG. As you know, at Bank of America, a lot of her work actually had to do with ESG investing. Yeah. She's taken that with her.
Before it was cool.
Before it was cool, exactly. Before I knew what it stood for even. But she took that with her to TPG, and she's really working on trying to get us through this climate transformation, which she estimates will cost $4 trillion a year going out into the some time to come. So we talked to her today specifically about where that money's going to come from. It's a big number.
It would seem impossible, right, to get there, but at least half of it is kind of accounted for already. Meaning, if you think about financing as an 80-20, debt is 80, equity is 20. So I'll use on the debt side. Just looking at the annual reports from banks around the world, you can easily get to $2 trillion. I mean, I know Bank of America and their numbers on sort of what they do in terms of financing of the SDGs is about 8% of the overall effort. I just talked to someone at HSBC. They said their number is about 200 million. And I think that JP is probably about that too. So you can get to $2 trillion by extrapolating out. If B of A is 8% of the whole, then you get to about 1.8, maybe 2 trillion. And then equity is another 400 or 500 billion on top of that. So there you have $2.5 trillion. And that's this year. And of course, that's without the IRA and without just projected growth as it is. So I think you could, over time, in the next several years, see your way to $3 trillion, given what a boost the IRA has been. That leaves at least $1 trillion. And so now you're really running into who needs the other trillion and how do you get it? And who needs the other trillion is the developing world. They don't have risk management practices in place. So they don't have a government backing. They don't have the capital system to support it, and they are the most in need. So those are the ones that are kind of, shall we say, downwind of the industrial nations, and they are the most affected and the least able to deal with climate change. And they also can't make money from the kinds of innovations that are in place right now, again, because they don't have the capital structures in place. Thus, we've got to come up with a way to ameliorate that.
There's a lot of talk, a lot of discussion about the developed nations coming up with more money for the less fortunate nations to cover this. Also, some multinational organizations. At the same time, can they come up with enough, or do we need to have the private sector help us out?
Well, I'd argue you need the private sector. I think there is a large body of work and thousands of companies that believe the following could work. Companies, thousands, tens of thousands, but certainly thousands of companies have committed to being net zero. Hundreds of financial firms have committed to being net zero. That means there's a whole process they have to go through. They have to do an audit, take an inventory, figure out where they are in terms of their carbon footprint, ameliorate what they can, which is to go to a renewable electricity, to reduce their carbon footprint by what they do in terms of power, light, how they heat, how they cool their buildings. But we probably have 10 years till anyone can get to carbon neutrality. Why not allow companies who are on this trajectory, who've done an audit, who can be evaluated, use the delta between what they've got and where they need to be, pay a fee for that, if you will, and buy nature-based concerns in the developing world, or even put capital into the developing world, but you get credits for that. And as you know, Gina McCarthy and I put an editorial together that ran in Bloomberg about a week ago, and we really argued, think of this like the compliance markets. What does that mean? In the compliance markets, and I'll use California as an example, and now I'm really going to simplify this, but this is about right. And that is, if you're a car manufacturer and you have a certain emissions level that they are allowing, if you get over, If you go over it, you pay. And if you're under it, you can sell your extra credits to either another company, or it's a cap and trade. You either meet your goals or you don't. And if you don't meet your goals, you pay. This is the same idea of covering credits. It's just done on a voluntary basis.
To make that work, and by work, I really mean the ultimate goal is actually to help save the climate, to actually make sure we are having fewer emissions than we have had in the past. To make it work, do you need some third-party entity to audit it and enforce it, whether it's a government or otherwise?
Well, I don't think we're going to see a government do it in the U.S. I do not think we will see a national or federal compliance program. So yes, you have to do it. The companies have to do it on a voluntary basis, and they also have to be willing to be, as you call it, audited, evaluated, and there are plenty of mechanisms for that. And I think companies that are willing to say they would go carbon neutral or net zero are also willing to be evaluated in the same way.